right, guys, so we are going to look at Nixon today in this video, kind of what his presidency was, some of the things he was famous for, and then also just kind of some of the stuff that happened during his presidency, right, that don't necessarily always tie in with him, but important things that happened around the same time. All right, let's dive in here. All right, so Nixon and his foreign policies. So these are some of the things that happened that he was really famous for in regards to his foreign policies and kind of how he dealt with other countries and other countries' affairs. So he was really focused on trying to end that Vietnam conflict, right? The Vietnam War had been going on for quite a long time, and a lot of people were tired of it, and we're trying to find a way out of it and to get our troops back home in the United States. He was also focusing on ending the draft, so kind of ending that forced registration for the military, right? Letting people go in based on more of a volunteer effort rather than, forcing them to sign up. He was also focused on the space race, right? We were in a space race with Russia and China. We were trying to get to space first. And we are going to get there first. We are going to have the first mission to land on the moon. And it's going to kind of set in motion a feeling of almost superiority and fear, right, from the Soviets, right? They feel that we are more technologically advanced, more superior, and it causes a little bit of fear in regards to the Cold War that we were in. Nixon was also trying to improve his relationship with China. Right? China had been one of our main enemies, and he really made this effort to reach out and connect with them and to kind of ease some of those tensions. He was also managing the arms race, right, or the weapons and nuclear war race with the Soviet Union. He was focused on something we're going to learn about today called the détente, and he was also focusing on conflicts with the Middle East. So there was a lot going on, as you can see from this list, in Nixon's kind of foreign policy situation. So let's dive in to those with a little bit more detail. All right, so with Vietnam, right, the ending of the Vietnam War, Nixon believed that the U.S. should get out of Vietnam honorably, right? He wanted to leave Vietnam without betraying the South Vietnamese allies. He didn't really want to lose any credibility or prestige with those allies. So his plan was called Vietnamization, right? He wanted to build up South Vietnamese forces to fight on their own. So they supplied South Vietnam with military supplies, money so they could raise their soldiers' pay, and military advisors to train those troops. In June 1969, Nixon announced the removal of 25,000 U.S. troops from Vietnam. They also increased military pressure on North Vietnam. They ordered attacks on North Vietnamese bases and supply routes in Cambodia. The war was continuing to drag on, and they were going to end up launching air attacks on major cities in North Vietnam in 1972. They finally reached a peace agreement in January of 1973. But in 1975, South Vietnam is going to fall to communist North Vietnam, and Congress refused to provide any more military aid to help South Vietnam. So in the end, our efforts didn't really pay off how we had hoped, right? The North did take over the South, and Vietnam did become a communist country, and the U.S. stopped sending help. But something positive that happened during Nixon's administration here, we did land on the moon. So in May 1961, Kennedy said that the U.S. should commit to putting a man on the moon before the end of the decade. On July 20th, 1969, the Apollo 11 mission was successful. So Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to step on the moon. So the Eagle has landed, kind of this big quote, right? The Eagle landed. The Eagle was the lunar landing module that landed on the moon. Of course, the famous quote that came from this is "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." So it was actually broadcast on television to more than 1 billion people worldwide. They planted the American flag on the surface of the moon, And it created this huge pride for the United States in the space race with the Soviets, right? We kind of won. We got to the moon first. So what I wanted to do was actually share with you guys a link, or I guess a video about the moon landing. So I'm going to play it on here. Hopefully it will work really well on the recording. We'll see. All right, so bringing them back, that was just some clips of the moon landing, some audio, and some visuals that you can see of what billions of people around the world were seeing for the first time, right? It was an amazing moment in American history, and it was something that will kind of prevail on and kind of set the standard for what to expect during this arms race and this space race during the Cold War. All right, so Nixon was going to China. This was something very new, right? A lot of people kind of didn't meet up with their enemies. They didn't really try to force any kind of resolution or treaties or friendliness, right? But Nixon kind of changed that. So Henry Kissinger and Nixon believed that creating a relationship with China would make the Soviets improve their relationship with the United States. So they wanted to basically use China as a way to get the Soviets scared, right? Because if it looked like the United States was friendly with China, that would make the US stronger, right? So the Soviets would want to prevent a United States and Chinese alliance against them. So China invited the US national table tennis team to visit. This was a sign that things were improving, right? So the national ping pong tournament kind of went on. I don't know if you've seen Forrest Gump, but the scene where he goes to China and plays ping pong, that is a real thing. That is what happened. In February of 1972, Nixon went to China and met with Mao Zedong, right? They expanded trade between the US and China, and they also led to North Vietnamese leaders agreeing to meet for peace talks. The Soviet Union leaders signaled that they wanted to hold their own talks with the US. So it was working, right? Going over to China, talking to the Chinese government, talking to the North Vietnamese, also got the Soviet Union interested in talking and meeting with us as well. So détente. This is a term that you're going to see a lot during the Cold War, especially when it comes to Nixon. After visiting China, Nixon met with the Soviet leader and they became friends, right? They actually got along really well. They agreed to find ways to ease the tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. This is called the détente, right? It's kind of a period of cooling down. when you see Dayton, kind of think of an ice cube, right? It's cold, it's cool, it's kind of chilling. Things are getting a little bit more calm. They were hoping to reduce the arms race, right? That's where they were building up weapons. They were trying to relieve the economies and the the economies of the US and the Soviet Union, because building all these weapons was very expensive. And they were also hoping just to reduce the chance of war in general, right? To kind of have a more peaceful relationship. So the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, otherwise known as SALT. The US and the Soviet Union had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the entire world multiple times over. So MAD, which stands for Mutual Assured Destruction, right? This is something that each country understood. They understood that if they launched a nuclear weapon, it would mean their own destruction. It led to the need of keeping and building more and more weapons, right? So that's why we had this arms race, trying to kind of protect ourselves. That way, if we get attacked, we can attack back, even though we knew there would be a mutual assured destruction if this happened. So the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT for short, were talks between the US and the Soviets that started in 1969. So Nixon actually signed a treaty in 1972 and placed limits on developing nuclear weapons. That way, it would reduce the possibility of an all-out nuclear war. At this time, there was also conflicts going on in South Asia. So in 1971, East Pakistan fought to gain independence from Pakistan. Pakistan was supported by China, and East Pakistan was supported by India. So Nixon was in secret diplomatic talks with China, so he supported Pakistan with military and humanitarian aid. So East Pakistan won and actually became Bangladesh, which you can see here on the map. So this little section here was East Pakistan. It is now Bangladesh. These conflicts in the Middle East are quite large and quite expansive. So make sure you take your time to kind of read through that during the unit, especially so you can get all this info. But basically, in 1973, we saw the Yom Kippur War. This is when Egypt and Syria invaded Israel on Yom Kippur, the holiest Jewish holiday. So Israel's prime minister asked Nixon for help, but he hesitated when he realized that the Soviet Union was supporting Egypt and Syria, right? Because he didn't want to bring on this arms race. It was very, very testy what we could do. They did send supplies and military equipment to Israel, which helped them. And it ended 16 days later after they were kind of stuck in a stalemate. But this is going to lead to the 1973 oil embargo against the United States and Western countries. So OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, was made up of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other oil-producing nations. The price of oil is quadrupling, right? Going up in 1 month. It's insane. It led to an energy crisis. There was huge long lines for gas. The states were putting in 55-mile-per-hour speed limits to try to get people to preserve their fuel. Schools, offices, factories all closed because they didn't have the fuel needed to keep them going. It brought the US and Soviets to the brink of conflict, and it actually damaged some of that relationship that they had been building, right? The Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, actually flew from nation to nation to try to work out a peace accord, right? He was going to all these countries trying to figure out how we could peacefully resolve this. Israel withdrew troops from the same positions in Sinai and Syria. Egypt promised not to use force with Israel again. Syria accepted terms but remained opposed to the existence of the state of Israel. It was a lot going on. But basically, war is going to upset the status quo in the Middle East and lay the groundwork for the Egypt-Israel peace treaty, which we'll see in the next slide. So the OPEC embargo led to U.S. emergency oil supplies. They were out of oil. They were trying to dip into kind of the reserves and what they had saved. It led to a lot of issues in the U.S. So that's kind of where we're going to kind of relax and cool down here for Nixon until we go into our next part of this unit. But basically, some things to remember are the Cold War policies that we have seen so far, right? We had the policy of containment. We need to keep it boxed up so it doesn't spread, because if it spreads, right, that's the domino theory. If it spreads to one country, it's going to fall onto all those little countries around it, right? It's going to infect it, like you see here, Laos, and it falling into Vietnam, Taiwan, Korea, the Philippines, right? They were afraid if they didn't contain it, it would spread. It would fall like dominoes. They knew that if they started a nuclear war, it would be mutual assured destruction, that they would basically be dooming themselves, right? If we attack the USSR would attack us back, and it would be destructive. And then now we're on the policy of the détente, right? This kind of cooling off, calming down, trying to ease some of the tensions. So that is where we'll leave off for this recording. On your next one, it will go more into some of those policies of Nixon and the Watergate scandal and all that fun stuff. So thank you for watching this recording.